flying low and slow, so everyone can shoot at you. I'm 24, and I've already flown over 70 combat missions. I'm now at more than 200 combat missions. That means this guy completed at least 130 missions in 365 days. That's 1.5 times more than the number of games an NBA team plays in a season. If you subtract sleep, maintenance, and rare days off, Ukrainian Army aviation pilots are flying nearly one mission every single day. And that's not even the full picture of how intense this war is. Our main task is supporting our infantry. When helicopters show up on the battlefield, they boost the morale of Ukrainian troops and crush the enemy's spirit. When a chopper starts engaging the target, it's scarier for enemy infantry than artillery. It's like dancing a waltz at over 300 kilometers per hour, but with rockets. And just because you're in the air doesn't mean you're safe. A lot of the time, it's close quarters combat. The pilot can take a bullet or a man-pads missile, because down on the ground, you're lit up like the MSG Sphere in Las Vegas. When you fire your weapons, you might be just 200 to 150 meters from the enemy. You dive straight into a cloud of fire and shrapnel. And this happens every day for 3.5 years straight. Yet the helicopters are still flying. How the hell do these machines survive such conditions? Must be some kind of next-gen super chopper, right? Our newest helicopter is the Mi-17. It was designed in 1965. Yep, the Mi-17, courtesy of the United States. We'll get to what that is and why the US gave them to Ukraine in a moment. But first, if you want to see what Ukrainian pilots really think of the helicopters they fly, and what it's like inside these machines, smash that like button so the soulless YouTube algorithm shows this video to more people. And as a thank you, here's a fun fact most of your friends probably don't know. Ukrainian is the only language in the world with 3 commonly used words for helicopter. Maybe it's because Mr. Sikorsky, the father of the modern chopper, was born and raised in Kyiv. But one thing is clear. Ukrainians have a special relationship with their helicopters. A helicopter isn't just a machine. It's part of our team, part of a small family. It helps us get the job done, and it pulls us out of trouble. All right then, let's take off. First up, the Mi-24, or HIND as NATO calls it. Designed in the late 1960s and 70s, this beast is basically an infantry fighting vehicle with rotors. This bird is armored. It can take a hit from a 50 cal. With its sleek fuselage and wing-shaped stabilizers, the Mi-24 is still one of the fastest attack helicopters on the planet, topping out at 345 kilometers per hour. And yeah, even when it's just sitting in the grass, it looks ready to eat something. If you've got insectophobia, fear of bugs, stay back. Because up close, this thing is basically a flying crocodile. Inside the cockpit, you've got 2 seats. The commander pilot sits in the back, a bit higher up, with a better view and full flight control. Up front is the weapons operator. But here's the twist. Both crew members can fly the bird and fire the weapons. So how do they avoid turning into a flying blender? Simple. Strict radio discipline and tight coordination. They talk through an intercom using short, clipped phrases. Got it? No? It's stuff like, taking control, ready to fire, target in sight, passing control. Roughly the same phrases they use later, at the bar. So yeah, your bartender might actually be halfway to becoming a pilot. But clear comms aren't everything. That's why this crew runs like a family, maybe even closer than that. I've been flying with my commander since day 1 of the full-scale invasion, and we're still flying together. Experienced teams barely need words. They just know what the other's about to do, even before anyone says a thing. And in this family, there's a third member, the helicopter itself. Most guys give their birds female names. Which ones? Let's just say that's kind of personal. We'll get to superstitions later, but first, let's talk weapons. The Mi-24 can carry a 12.7mm quad-barrel machine gun, a twin 23mm aircraft cannon, or more commonly a twin-barrel 30mm cannon. It's absolute hell for infantry and lightly armored vehicles. But against tanks? More like a mosquito bite. There was one time the commander fired a few bursts into a tank turret. One round bounced back straight into the commander's cockpit blister and got lodged in the armor cover. As you can see, the Mi-24's missile loadout is pretty versatile. For self-defense against aircraft or drones, Ukrainian versions often come equipped with Stinger missiles. But Army aviation in Ukraine is mostly used against ground targets, and for that, the main tool of destruction is the unguided rocket, or NAR. We're talking about S-5, S-8, and S-13 rockets, the same stuff often seen on Soviet-era helicopters and attack jets.
більше 50.
When you fire off 50 to 60 rockets in one salvo, you feel all-powerful. I didn't expect it to be that intense. Let's break it down. S5, the smallest one. It's more of a crowd sprayer. Light, cheap, and perfect against infantry or soft targets. Up to 32 rockets per pod. S8, the sweet spot. Around 20 rockets per pod, with better accuracy and solid performance against bunkers and vehicles. S13, the beast. Only 5 rockets per pod, but these punch through concrete and heavy armor. The only issue? They're getting harder to find. That's why Ukraine is now integrating the American Hydra 70. This is a 70mm unguided rocket, perfect for taking out both infantry and light armor. And coming soon, the legendary Zuni. Yep, 127mm Zuni rockets are expected to enter service on Ukrainian helicopters. Depending on when you're watching this, the first Zunis may already be in action. So, subscribe now to see US rockets launched from Soviet-era helis, and support our work while you're at it. Thanks for sticking with us. But helicopters don't just blast targets from the sky. They also insert tactical assault teams behind enemy lines. The Mi-24 can carry up to 8 troops, but the Mi-8, another workhorse of the Ukrainian military, can fit up to 24 soldiers, or 12 wounded on stretchers. The Mi-8 is one of the most mass-produced and iconic Soviet-era utility helicopters. It's often paired with the Mi-24 because they were both built by the same design bureau, which means they share a ton of components, great for logistics and pilot training. Ukrainian troops have been using the Mi-24 plus Mi-8 combo since at least 2014, a powerful 1-2 punch of attack plus transport that still gets the job done today. My main bird is the Mi-8, but I'm currently training on the Mi-24, so I'll be flying both. The Mi-8 and Mi-24 may come from the same design bureau, but they're not twins, and Ukrainian pilots know the difference. In the Mi-8, the pilots sit side by side, both with full controls. So yes, it's a crew family, just with more guys. You've got the commander on the left, co-pilot on the right, and a third crew member in the middle. That's usually a flight engineer, navigator, or weapons operator, depending on the mission. And about those weapons, usually we mount rocket pods on both sides, S8s or S13s, plus a machine gun up front, and sometimes another in the tail. Ukrainian pilots often fire unguided rockets while pitching upward, a known combat trick called lofting. You angle the nose up just a few degrees and launch your rockets on an arc, like mini artillery shells. That way, you can fire from just 30 to 100 feet off the ground, low enough to stay under enemy radar, and out of direct fire. Mi-8s and Mi-24s might look alike at first glance. They both have twin engines, similar payload capacity, and can carry troops and weapons. And yeah, they shoot rockets the same way. But in terms of battlefield role, they're built for very different things. The Mi-8's job is to deliver stuff: troops, ammo, wounded, mobile HQs, or electronic warfare gear. Its importance is proven by the existence of its famous export version, the Mi-17. The Mi-17 is a modified Mi-8. That thing just flies like a dream on its own. Fun fact, the United States once bought Mi-17s from Russia to supply the Afghan army. Why? Because Afghans already knew how to use them, and they're way easier to maintain than American choppers. Fast forward to 2021. The US pulls out of Afghanistan. Some of those Mi-17s end up in Uzbekistan, and it turns out they were outfitted with some very handy extras: countermeasures against manpads, extra armor, and night flight systems. All of that perfect for Ukraine. The first flight into besieged Mariupol, where Ukrainian troops held Azovstal steel plant, was flown on a Mi-17. Honestly, we couldn't believe we pulled it off. Between March 21st and May 11th, 2022, 15 helicopters and 45 crew members flew nearly 30 rescue missions to Azovstal. They brought in reinforcements, Starlink terminals, ammo, and medicine. They flew out the wounded. And if you couldn't fly back, the order was, if you can't return, grab your rifle and fight. Because let's be real, if a helicopter gets hit, the chances of surviving are slim. Because of the rotor blades, you can't eject. There is something called an emergency exit, but that only works at certain speeds and altitudes. But combat flights like these happen just 16 feet or a bit more off the ground. To deploy a parachute, you'd need at least 200 feet. And there's another reason why getting hit by a manpads is basically a death sentence for a helicopter pilot. If you've got people on board, you're not jumping out. The commander stays with the bird till the very end. Yes, every chopper has flares. And yes, for years it felt like those flares were endless. But this war has a way of teaching you otherwise. One time, the missile fire was so intense, by the time we got back, we had 0 flares left. We fired off every single one. Let's just say, we got lucky. The machines are running on fumes, pushed to the limit. You're supposed to carry 20 people, but you load up 28 wounded and do whatever it takes to get them out. You push the airframe till it's practically screaming, boiling hot and burning. That's why Ukrainian crews now hang weapons only on 2 of the 6 hardpoints on most helicopters. The rest are too worn out. But Ukraine does have some birds it doesn't fly every day, only for top priority missions. Enter the Sikorsky UH-60 Blackhawk. That's right, Mr. Sikorsky made it home. The first 2 Blackhawks went to Ukraine's defense intelligence, but you won't find much info about them. Why? Because HUR operates in the shadows. And the Blackhawk? It's one of the most recognizable helicopters in the world, meaning just seeing it can blow a whole operation. Still, we're pretty sure the Blackhawk shares one thing with every other chopper in this video. Notice those little fans in every cockpit? They're not just for air circulation. They're basically a cult object, a symbol of stability. Back in the day, they were the only source of ventilation. Today, even with modern AC, those fans stay right where they are. Some pilots even take them along when switching aircraft. If that fan doesn't spin when the engine fires up, time to check everything again on the ground? Superstition? Maybe, but war is full of them. Want a separate video about military superstitions? Drop a comment, or tell us what we should cover next. All Ukrainian aircraft have been destroyed. That's what the Russians claimed. But something didn't go to plan. Someone gave them a nasty surprise. Unknown birds launched Storm Shadow missiles into the landing ship Minsk and the submarine Rostov-on-Don. Then they used the same missiles to blow up the Black Sea Fleet HQ. And they didn't stop there. The corvette Askold got a fiery gift from a scalp egg. Think that's it? Take a look at the massive explosion of the landing ship Novocherkassk. Alright, time to unmask the culprits. These hits came from the old-timers. Su-24s, Su-25s, and Su-27s. For these aircraft, this is their last big war. Time doesn't spare anyone. But paired with modern Western missiles, they've proven they're still deadly. So how did these aging jets handle the skies? The Su-24M is Ukraine's primary frontline bomber. It's designed for missile and bomb strikes in any weather, day or night. It flies low to hit ground and naval targets. This aircraft can carry up to 8 tons of weapons. To keep that kind of load airborne, it's packed with massive fuel tanks. That's actually an external fuel tank under the wing. It holds 3,000 liters. The jet's from the 1970s, so it burns fuel like crazy. It needs a ton of fuel to stay in the air. Ukrainian Su-24s fly at extremely low altitudes to dodge Russian air defenses. A crew of 2 keeps eyes on the terrain. One bad move and you lose control or crash into an obstacle. Yeah, that's the whole idea. Fly really fast and really low. The plane is built to skim the terrain and carry out missions at ultra-low altitude, but that means the crew has to stay laser-focused. The navigator helps too, watching the ground, warning the pilot if he's dropping too sharply. It's a 2-person job. Another challenge: air combat over cities. Russian pilots were bombing civilian neighborhoods. They had to be stopped, and mistakes would cost lives. There were residential buildings full of civilians nearby, so the risk of a mistake was huge. You had to be 100% sure you were directly over the target. Only then could you complete the mission. At the start of the invasion, the Russians did everything they could to gain full control of the skies. They bombed runways with missiles, making it extremely hard for Ukrainian Su-24s to take off. While the pilots were launching and defending the skies, engineers were rushing to repair damaged airstrips. We had 3 direct hits on the runway. Only one plane could take off at a time. They hit 6 slabs dead on. The rest, in the center and on the sides, were full of holes from enemy missiles. But we still took off. We still completed our missions. To make those missions possible, a massive team of ground crew keeps the planes and airfields running. These techs worry about every aircraft like it's their own child, and wait for the pilots like Hachiko. You can't imagine how they wait. There's this spot where the plane taxis. They have to touch the wing before takeoff. They always wait. In snow, rain, frost, they sit there hoping their jet returns. During the battle for Kyiv, the Su-24s played a critical role. Pilots dropped heavy bombs on Russian convoys, disrupting logistics and halting the advance. Our brigade, when the Russians were pushing toward Kyiv, our guys were destroying their convoys at the cost of their own lives. They had to, so the enemy wouldn't get through. They dropped 500 kilo bombs. You couldn't even count how much iron they unloaded. Each hit on enemy supply lines, and equipment saved countless lives on the ground. News of destroyed ammo dumps and armor gave hope to Ukraine's infantry. They knew someone had their back in the sky. We do this for those guys. Like our commander said, no country ever won a war without aviation. That's the truth. Aviation alone can't win though. The ones who win are the guys up front. But we'll support them, because we've got no other choice. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next epic stories from the air, the ground, and the sea. Unfortunately, every flight can be a pilot's last, especially when they're flying aging jets that should have retired years ago. Ukrainian Su-24s, Su-25s, and Su-27s have to go up against modernized Russian Su-34s. Sometimes, these dogfights end in tragedy. One Su-25 pilot attacks Russian positions with a photo of his fallen son, also a pilot, in hand. The father got back in the cockpit to take revenge. When a missile hits the aircraft, you're left hoping for two things: God and the ejection system. But when it comes to ejecting, the pilot only has a few seconds to make the call. These are our so-called rescue handles. You grab them and pull with about 20 kilograms of force. That triggers automatic ejection for both crew members. First, the navigator ejects, then the pilot, with about 1 second between them so they don't collide mid-air. It all happens automatically. Our job is simple. Just pull those handles. It doesn't matter who does it. Navigator goes first, then the pilot. This pilot, Su-25, was hit by a missile from a Panzer air defense system. He was flying low over a tree line when the aircraft took a hit, right when it was most expected. His fast reaction saved his life. He veered the plane away and ejected just in time. I pulled the handle to the right, turned the aircraft away. It felt like it was starting to spin out. I grabbed the bars and punched out. Instantly, one pull, and I was on the ground. Here's how he recalls those seconds between ejection and landing, as if he stepped into the afterlife and came back. Everything went dark from the missile impact, and again from the ejection. Same feeling. Did you see the chute open? No. My vision came back when I was already on the ground. I'd landed. Like a cork, just popped out and fell. But as soon as he hit the ground, Russian forces surrounded him and opened fire. I looked around for where to run, then a bullet whizzed past, I dropped. Just hit the ground. And they started shooting, just like in the movies. Bullets whistling by and slamming into the dirt. Exactly like that. There was nowhere to run, and he was injured. It could have been fatal, so he raised his hands. Luckily, he was later exchanged and returned home. Now he's recovering and sharing his experience. Here's how he remembers one of his Su-25 missions. We were hitting from high altitude. Lead jet completed his run. The second one was lining up, and he says, "Watch out, rounds are bouncing off." The shells were ricocheting off the vehicles. He starts his run, pulls the trigger, and sees a tank turret flying through the air. The pilot holds priceless combat experience, and he's ready to pass it on to younger aviators. He's flown missions deep in enemy air defense zones, dropping bombs at insane speeds. Hopefully, he'll be back in the skies soon, doing what he loves and defending his country once again. Hitting a target. Getting to the target. That's not just low altitude, that's critical altitude. I'd say it's terrain-hugging flight. 3 to 4 meters off the ground at 600 kilometers per hour. The Su-27 is the youngest among the Soviet-era jets still flown by Ukraine. It's proven itself in combat. And like its fighter siblings, it relies on a whole crew of dedicated specialists. You need around 10 people to get one jet mission ready. And how long does that take? Anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. It's a high-stakes job, because the pilot's life depends on that jet running perfectly. And when the aircraft returns safely, that's the best reward. The best feeling? When you send out a jet fully armed and it comes back empty. That means it all landed somewhere useful, and suddenly, even the dirtiest jobs feel worth it. Take a look at the cockpit. This metal bird is packed with controls, but pilots know every switch and dial by heart. Their memory is on another level. What you're seeing in front of you is the control stick. On the left, you've got the throttle. Like the gas pedal in a car, you work those together. Then we've got switches for engine start and flight systems. And right in front is the instrument panel. This young pilot has been defending Ukraine's skies since day one of the full-scale invasion. His first mission was brutal, intercepting missiles aimed at Ukrainian airfields. My first flight. It was really intense. I turned on the weapons system and saw Iskander missiles flying right over me. I told the flight control group I had air targets in sight, and the command post replied, "No need to report. Shoot them all down." That hit me hard. According to Su-27 pilots, the key to air superiority now lies in electronics and missile tech. If your gear isn't on par with the enemy's, you're in serious trouble. Today, if you're up in the air, it's all about long-range missile combat. Dogfights? Basically a thing of the past. Whoever spots the enemy first, whoever's targeting system works faster. Whoever has the longer range missile, that's who wins. Ukrainian Su-27 pilots knowingly took risks, fully aware that Russian jets had the technological edge. But their mission was simple: push Russian aircraft away from Ukraine's major cities and make sure the enemy didn't feel at home in the skies. Our targeting systems are 2 generations behind the Su-34s. Our missiles too. The fight came down to closing in. Sometimes we locked onto them. You could even get a target lock. But we couldn't get within launch range. They'd fire first. Still, luck often favored the bold. In the early months of the invasion, Ukrainian pilots practically lived in the sky. And that's no exaggeration. Even with our shorter missile range, we kept trying. We launched. We pushed them back. Almost every night, each pilot flew 2 or even 3 sorties. That's 1.5 hours of air combat at night. It was brutal. One time they fired 6 missiles at me in one sortie. I'll never forget that. The physical and mental toll was immense. Pilots were running on fumes, and sometimes exhaustion nearly killed them. There were moments when I literally begged the plane, "Pull up, pull up." I was diving down low, sun in my eyes, and I tilted too far right. I suddenly realized I was plummeting at a crazy angle. I pulled up, but with full fuel tanks, the nose was up, but the jet kept dropping. I said to it, "Come on, we can do this." I was talking to the jet like a teammate, and we made it out. To keep the Su fleet flying and fighting, Ukrainian mechanics are constantly modifying them, including adapting them to carry NATO weapons. It's constantly being upgraded. We keep adding things, tweaking systems. As you know, we're now operating with Western weapons too. We found ways to integrate them. The jets still have enough life and capability to fly. Ukrainian Su-jets now carry a wide mix of weaponry: Soviet-era R-27 and R-73 air-to-air missiles, AGM-88 HARM, JDAM, AASM Hammer, Soviet KH-25s, unguided S-13, European Storm Shadow, and even American Zuni rockets. This pilot has tested most of them, and here's how he remembers it. Our first JDAM strike, first HARM launch, destroyed 9 out of 10 air defense systems. Insane effectiveness. Then we dropped our first small diameter bomb and the first drone shoot down. Now listen to what kind of hell he's been flying through. Heading into these missions takes nerves of steel. Imagine diving in for a bombing run while enemy fighters and SAMs are locked onto you, and those air defense systems have crazy range. On top of that, the battlefield is mobile. Systems like TORs and books can move dozens of kilometers per hour. So to fly up to the front line, climb to 1,500 meters, dive, and drop iron bombs, that's almost impossible. Here's what his team came up with to increase their odds and dodge threats during missions. We had to look for alternatives. That's how we started using guided bombs with GPS and inertial navigation systems. Thanks to their aerodynamic wings and tail kits, their range is several times greater, allowing us to strike from farther behind the front line. But we still carry out every mission inside the enemy's air defense zone. The cherry on top was launching American missiles from Soviet aircraft. It completely threw the Russians off, and they needed time to figure out how to respond. HARMs played a huge role in giving us more freedom. The first few months, the Russians just couldn't believe we were launching American missiles from Soviet jets. The theories they came up with were hilarious. Western missiles helped Ukraine level the playing field in the skies. Ukrainian pilots gained confidence in their firepower, and Russian pilots started thinking twice before diving deep past the front line. Now, to close things out, here's a lighter note. Some of the unique traditions Ukrainian pilots follow before a mission. Like this guy, who almost refused to swap out his old battered flight suit. When it all started, I was flying in that suit. It was torn, worn out, but I didn't want to change it. Pilot superstitions. Everyone kept asking, "What are you wearing? Are you really flying in that?" But that suit's been through everything. Fire and water? No way I'm giving it up. Another pilot has a coffee ritual that all baristas and caffeine lovers will appreciate.
І що за бобон, це як...
My ritual is to make myself a cup of coffee before a mission. I drink about 3/4 and leave the rest, so I can come back and finish it. And this guy agreed to do an interview only after returning from a sortie, and for good reason.
Да, ну є такі традиції.
There's a tradition. No photos before a flight. Bad things might happen. This war will likely be the last for Ukraine's Su-jets. Time's catching up with them. NATO weapons have boosted their punch, but it's still just a stopgap. The bigger challenge now is keeping them operational. Spare parts are scavenged from damaged aircraft. Meanwhile, these aging jets are up against Russia's 4th and 5th generation fighters. Western aircraft are a better match for that, and the Ukrainian Air Force is gradually transitioning to them. Want to see a video on other fighter jets? Maybe even from past wars? Let us know who you'd pick. MiG-29, Dassault Mirage 2000, or FA-18. Drop your pick in the comments.
Зараз заходять літаки, будуть ракети пускати.
They said there'd be missiles. I'd have to intercept. I thought, okay, no big deal. I geared up. But mid-mission, my jet started falling apart. Flames were everywhere. That's when I realized I wasn't coming back. This MiG-29 pilot was shot down during a combat sortie. Luckily, he managed to eject and later return to duty. But it wasn't the only time a Ukrainian pilot came within inches of death. Some of Ukraine's MiG-29s are 40 years old, literally older than their pilots. So is the situation really that bad? Today, we're breaking down how Ukraine's most common Air Force jet performs when paired with Western weapons. And who better to tell that story than the pilots who patrol the skies and fly into danger every day? Ukrainian pilot Dmytro has flown 69 combat missions. On the 70th, he almost didn't make it back. While intercepting Russian missiles, he had to eject after his MiG took critical damage and started breaking up mid-air. He'll never forget that day, and even got a tattoo to mark the mission that nearly cost him his life.
Це вже після того, як...
After months in the hospital, I came home and decided to get a tattoo to remind myself that I survived. I got my jet inked, the words "I survived," and the date. He has no regrets about risking his life for the mission. Every target he shot down could mean hundreds, or even thousands, of civilian lives saved. When you shoot down a Kaliber missile or a Shahed drone, you feel a moment of joy, because you know that thing wasn't headed for some power station. It was going for someone's home, or a kindergarten. Hit that like button so YouTube shares this video, and more people hear the stories of Ukraine's fighter pilots. Dmytro's successful ejection isn't the only one. Ukraine's MiG-29s are on patrol both day and night. Sometimes they're forced to shoot down targets in brutal weather. That puts pilots in constant danger. But there's no alternative. The stakes are simply too high. I carried out guidance and intercepted my 5th aerial target. I launched at it, and unfortunately, after the target was destroyed, my jet was damaged by debris from the explosion. The cockpit glass shattered, and the front nose section was torn apart. This pilot was intercepting a Shahed 136 drone over the city of Vinnytsia, home to 370,000 civilians. When debris tore through his MiG-29, he couldn't eject right away. The jet would have crashed into residential neighborhoods. To prevent a disaster, he fought to control the plane, even though the controls had mostly stopped responding. My first thought was, I really don't want to eject. I saw some town ahead. At the time, I didn't know which one. It was just lights on the horizon. I checked the controls. It wasn't responding on the pitch axis. Pulling up or down didn't work. On the roll axis, left and right, it still worked. When he finally regained some control, he started descending and steering away from the city. Once the glow of the streets vanished from sight, Vadim pulled the ejection handles. Seconds later, the jet crashed into an open field. So I banked left to start descending, saw a dark patch ahead, figured it was probably a field, no buildings. Then the fire reached the cockpit. Flames started creeping toward me, and that's when I ejected. No hesitation, just like the manual says. Ukraine's airspace is divided into responsibility zones for each tactical aviation brigade. Some MiG-29 pilots focus on air defense. Others carry out strike missions using both Soviet and Western weapons against ground targets. Everyone has their own task. Each aircraft has a specific mission. Some are purely for air defense, intercepting cruise missiles and Shaheds. Others are assigned to strike ground targets. It's all organized. Who does what? To carry out those missions, MiG-29 pilots need modernized aircraft capable of using Western weapons. That's where Ukrainian engineers teamed up with NATO specialists, and together they turned 40-year-old jets into something impressive. They made it so simple and intuitive for us. You have to understand how the system is supposed to work, whether it's a button, a tablet, or a map. No one knew at first, but they made it easy, and it works. It works accurately, and the results speak for themselves. Now, the MiG-29 can carry not only Soviet air-to-air missiles like the R-27 and R-73, but also Western weapons such as HARM, JDAM, AASM Hammer, and the ADM-160 MALD. That's been a serious boost to Ukraine's aerial firepower. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos about the Russia-Ukraine war and the weapons both sides are using. Thanks to Western weapons, this aircraft was modernized. Now we can use various types of air-launched munitions like GBU bombs and HARM missiles. That's powerful stuff. We can't use them to their full potential yet, but we're getting closer. Before Western missiles were delivered, Ukrainian pilots had a much harder time carrying out missions. Russian forces had the upper hand thanks to their own advanced systems. We couldn't hit certain targets until we were given Western weapons. The real results only started showing up after we got that gear. Before that, we couldn't even reach their air defense systems. I'm speaking specifically about the MiG-29 here, but after that, those numbers were great to hear. You come back from a mission, and they send you a video showing you took out an enemy air defense launcher. The riskiest part was entering a dogfight. From the start, the odds were stacked against Ukrainian pilots. If a newer Russian fighter locked onto a Ukrainian jet, the crew was in deep trouble. Sure, taking stuff out is the best part. Cover missions are a bit boring. The plane's pretty outdated. We just can't go head-to-head with enemy aircraft. We don't have the range or power in our missiles to beat them, and the targeting system is ancient. Luckily, Western weapons changed the game on the battlefield, and Russian air defenses did not like the surprise. After I launched the missiles, we returned to base. The mission was complete. The next day, we got confirmation. We'd destroyed a Buk M3 and an S-400. Here's how another pilot remembers a mission to take out Russian air defense. After identifying the target, his squad was given the coordinates. He geared up fast, but the weather was terrible. We had to fly a mission to destroy enemy air defense. It was part of a joint operation. There was supposed to be an assault in that area. We were told to prep the sortie ahead of time, but the weather took a nasty turn, and it was at night. Navigation could fail. Systems might go down. You still have to orient yourself and complete the mission. He decided to go for it anyway, and it turned into one of the scariest days of his life. The constant fear of getting lost or having his gear fail weighed heavily, but he pushed through, and it paid off. I was already in my harness, all geared up, ready to jump into the jet. I said, "Let's do this. There's no turning back now." And everything went well. We did it. The mission was a success. But for me, it was terrifying. The weather was absolutely brutal. Another big win for Ukrainian pilots came with the introduction of the AGM-88 HARM missiles. This pilot, callsign Smereka, was the first to fire one during Ukraine's counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region. At the time, he had no idea how the mission would end. He hadn't even had the chance to test the weapon in a low-stress environment. Our partners told us, "This is how you'll use it. No test flights like before. No firing ranges to try it out and see if it works. Just real combat conditions." When he took off and reached the launch zone, he held his breath. Until that moment, he had never used American weapons on a Soviet jet. Here's how that combat mission ended. And that was the moment. Will it launch? Will it launch right? God forbid it explodes under the wing. We didn't know, but our Western partners kept assuring us, everything's gonna work. And it did work. One of the biggest challenges for pilots is simply the age of the aircraft. The jets were upgraded to extend their service life, but that didn't fix all the strategic problems. These planes are often way older than me. Some are 40 years old. So when you take off on a mission, all kinds of failures can happen. Just comes with age. The worst case scenario during a MiG-29 flight is a sudden, unpredictable system failure. And with how old the planes are, it feels like playing the lottery. Unfortunately, Sheer bad luck could mean the mission fails. Or worse, the pilot and plane are lost. Let's say the hydraulics fail. You can't finish the mission. You've got to return. The tech crew checks it out, finds the issue, and fixes it fast. These people are trained pros. They know the problem. Within hours, the hose is replaced. To keep the entire MiG-29 fleet flying, a massive team works around the clock at every airbase. They not only handle repairs and inspections on the ground, but also guide pilots via comms during missions. My buddies and I counted. You need 100 people between the base itself, communications, maintenance, engineers, and command staff. That's the minimum needed for just one pilot to take off. The best reward for that team? Seeing their pilot return home alive. And a little bonus, getting news about a successful strike. Just look at this. A repair base for Russian drones goes up in flames after being hit by a GBU-39. In this footage, a Ukrainian MiG-29 team wipes out a Russian command post. 2 AASM-250 hammer bombs take out enemy drone operators. Even an FSB officer hub in Russia's Belgorod region wasn't safe. Those guys got a fiery hello from the hammer. And a Russian company command post also got to experience just how accurate Western weapons really are. All of this was made possible thanks to the upgraded MiG-29s Ukraine inherited from the Soviet Union. NATO weapons and additional aircraft from Slovakia and Poland also played a big part. Speaking of Polish jets, there's a neat detail on them. Artwork of pilots from the legendary 303 squadron that fought in the Battle of Britain as part of the Royal Air Force in World War II. In this war, the MiG-29 became so iconic that even LEGO made a toy version. It appeared in a video greeting for Ukraine's Independence Day. Now you can own your own fighter jet too. Well, a plastic one. But on a serious note, MiGs played a major role in the battle for Kyiv and still effectively take out Russian targets. However, it's fair to say this is likely their last war. These jets are often 10, 20, even 30 years older than the men flying them. To reduce the risk for pilots, Ukraine's Air Force is transitioning to F-16s and Mirage 2000s. Hopefully, that shift happens quickly, and the MiG-29s get the retirement they deserve. On display in military museums? Would you like to see more videos about other aircraft? Maybe the legendary B-1 Lancer, the Soviet White Swan II-160, or the most expensive bomber in history, the Northrop B-2 Spirit? Let us know in the comments or suggest your own pick.
2 versus 2. A pair of Russian Su-27s head straight for Kyiv's government district, but they're spotted by 2 Ukrainian MiG-29s patrolling the skies. This might be the first battle since Vietnam where pilots see their enemies up close through cockpit canopies. The outcome seems obvious. Su-25 ground attack jets are no match for MiG-29s. But here's the catch. Shooting down jets directly over the government district is about as helpful as letting them drop their bombs. What did the Ukrainian pilots do instead? Let's hear it straight from them. I visually spotted a pair of Su-25s hugging the right bank of the Dnipro River. They were flying at about 165 feet above the ground, practically skimming the riverbed. The Ukrainian pilots divided the targets between them, since the Russian dynamic duo decided to split up and go in different directions. My wingman's target climbed above the clouds, turned around and tried to flee. The wingman fired a missile. The Russian pilot was heading north, away from Kyiv, but the air-to-air missile caught up with him a few minutes outside the city. The pilot's fate is unknown, but there was still one Su-25 circling over Kyiv. So what became of him? My target was maneuvering really close to the ground. Engaging him over the city wasn't an option. And then came an unexpected twist. Someone on the ground launched a missile from a man-pads. The Ukrainian pilot caught the launch in his rearview mirror and had to break off momentarily to avoid the missile. The maneuver worked. The missile missed. But then, when I came back for another attack after the missile had passed, he lost control and just crashed into the ground. And maybe, at that moment, Kyiv locals started whispering about a pilot with the call sign the Ghost of Kyiv, defending his city. Turns out, it was our unit, our brigade, defending Kyiv, the Kyiv region, the north, and the center of Ukraine from the very first hours of the war. Meet Juice, a Ukrainian pilot. He was the first to emphasize that Ukraine desperately needed F-16s, and, fun fact, he convinced the US Congress faster than most politicians could dream of. just a regular Ukrainian guy. Sadly, he died in a plane crash before the first American jets arrived in Ukraine. But in the first 30 hours of Russia's invasion, Juice's unit and Byolar claimed 6 air victories over Kyiv. They shot down 2 Su-35s, 2 Su-25s, 1 Su-27, and a MiG-29. What a record! Give it a thumbs up if you think this could inspire the next Top Gun. But here's a question: why are the Russian planes flying so low? Here's the deal. Flying below 490 feet makes it harder for ground-based radar to spot you. It's basically the military equivalent of hiding under your mom's couch. On top of that, water surfaces mess with radar signals. Russian pilots were using riverbeds as highways, sneaking close to their targets. Bold move, but also a massive mistake. Here's what we mean. According to General James B. Hecker, when it first started out, they were flying right into the surface-to-air missile engagement zones of the Ukrainians. Why were they charging in like flies into a spider's web? There's an explanation. On February 24, 2022, Russian forces hit at least 11 airfields overnight and another 10 throughout the day. Their goal? Wipe out Ukrainian planes on the ground before they could even take off. But I turn on the radio and I hear, "All crews take off." Now, let's clear something up. A fighter jet isn't a car. You can't just turn the ignition and cruise to the nearest parking lot. Pilots need special gear and flight orders. Planes have to be fueled and armed. But the Ukrainian command had planned for this and managed to pull it off. Still, there were a few hiccups. There was this huge line, a literal traffic jam of planes on the runway. But Dmytro got airborne and relocated his jet to another base, as did most of his comrades. That's how Ukraine saved nearly all its operational aircraft and pilots. Nearly. After I took off, my comrade was taxiing next. Unfortunately, a cruise missile hit the third one in our group. The last in line was Lieutenant Colonel Eduard Vaharovsky, posthumously named a hero of Ukraine. He was supposed to take off first, but let others go ahead of him. Andriy made it into the air, but what awaited him was deadly chaos. I armed my weapons and saw cruise missiles flying above me. Then the command came: engage everything without waiting for clearance. But I couldn't intercept them. They were way too high. I climbed as high as I could, but it didn't help. That was just the beginning of his adventure. Minutes later, his jet's navigator failed, and the radar lost track of his plane. I asked, "Where am I?" They replied, "We don't see you. We don't see you." I had no idea where I was. Picture this. Your first combat flight. It's pitch dark. Explosions everywhere. Enemy missiles in the sky. And you've been zooming at 500 miles per hour for 40 minutes with no clue where you are. At one point, Andriy decided to land on a highway, a maneuver they had drilled during pre-war exercises. He even picked a well-lit stretch of road. All he had to do was burn off some extra fuel. But just as he began his descent, contact was re-established. His plane showed up on radars 25 miles from an airfield in western Ukraine. A bit of technical magic later, Andriy landed safely, where his comrades were already waiting. But minutes later, that airfield was hit by missiles too. Thankfully, the strikes targeted infrastructure, sparing the jets. What happened on the morning of February 24th, moving the planes out of harm's way, was a unique operation. There's nothing like it in aviation history. So many aircraft airborne simultaneously for a relocation mission. Whew! Thumbs up if you think Top Gun is a kid's show compared to this. So, how did a Ukrainian MiG-29 vanish from radar and lose navigation? Well, apart from airfields, the Russians hit 50 other military sites, including ground-based radar systems. Some were destroyed by missile strikes, making life much harder for Ukrainian pilots. That's why those cocky Russian jets we mentioned earlier felt so confident. And that's where they messed up. Ukraine's surviving air defense systems were quickly relocated. This preserved a multi-layered air defense network using S-300 medium-range systems, short-range systems like Buck and Tor, and man-portable air defense systems, MANPADS, like Igla and Stinger. These systems became the nightmare fuel for Russian bombers early in the war. But let's not kid ourselves. Taking down a plane with a man-pads is no walk in the park. When hunting a helicopter, a ground operator has about 3 seconds to aim and fire. Against a jet, even less. And if you're standing in a forest or hilly terrain, good luck figuring out which direction the plane is coming from. Despite the challenges, Ukrainian shooters often turned Russian bombers and attack jets into scrap metal. Mobile air defense units kept Russian aviation from gaining air superiority. Constantly changing locations boosted not only their effectiveness, but also their survival rate. As a result, Russian planes had to adjust their tactics, avoiding Ukrainian-controlled airspace altogether. You'd think this gave Ukrainian pilots a break. Not a chance. For example, we operate in specific areas of the front. Our task might be to suppress enemy air defenses so helicopters and attack jets can strike with rockets and bombs. We started analyzing their moves, luring their air defenses into range of our own. They'd fire missiles at us, and we'd bait them closer until they got caught in our air defense trap. A deadly game of cat and mouse. But when a pilot's plane takes a hit, here's what happens. From the moment something goes wrong to the plane crashing takes about 6 seconds. I was flying at 3,000 feet and ejected somewhere around 1,600 to 1,900 feet. The jet was nearly uncontrollable, with flames all around me. I ejected, and as my parachute opened, I saw the burning plane crash near a forest not far away. This Ukrainian pilot is now undergoing rehabilitation for a back injury. Russia has air-to-air missiles, like the R-37, powerful, modern stuff we only learned about during the war. Their MiG-29s, Su-34s, and Su-35s have better weapons and more advanced targeting systems, allowing them to detect our planes from much farther away. Whether we fly low or high, they can still see us. Ukrainian pilots admit Russian jets are technically superior. By 2022, most Ukrainian fighters were 30 to 50 years old. The backbone of the Ukrainian Air Force is the MiG-29, a Soviet-era fourth-generation multi-role fighter developed in the late 1960s. Many of these planes hadn't been upgraded in decades, making them lag behind their Russian counterparts. But here's the kicker. The score keeps rising in Ukraine's favor. Thanks to modern Western weapons, Ukrainian pilots are hitting ground targets more effectively. We now use various munitions like GBU and HARM. They're powerful weapons, even if we can't fully unleash their potential. Here's what we know about the HARM missile. It's a smart American gadget. Its passive homing head locks on to radar signals, but it also has an active radar seeker. Even if Russians manage to turn off their radars, the HARM keeps flying to where the signal was last detected. And with GPS and inertial navigation, it'll hit its target even if the sun goes out. Sure, integrating modern weapons into old Soviet jets wasn't easy, but Ukraine made it work. For HARM launches, a special pylon was mounted on MiG-29s to make it compatible. Using these anti-radiation missiles has seriously complicated operations for Russian air defenses. Taking down systems like the S-300 or S-400, however, is a tough mission that often requires help from ground-based systems like HIMARS. For HARM launches, we had to sync up with other units. Watching HIMARS fire at night, seeing those rockets streak through the clouds, it's breathtaking. No words can describe it. But Ukraine didn't stop there. Soviet-era jets were also adapted to launch Storm Shadow Scalp stealth air-to-ground cruise missiles. These missiles don't just hit coordinates, they actively seek their targets based on preloaded images. Storm Shadows are perfect for taking out command centers, air bases, fuel and ammo depots, and even ships. Yes, they've sunk Russian landing ships and a submarine, the first submarine in history destroyed by a cruise missile. We couldn't hit those targets until we received Western weapons. But Ukrainian pilots have one more critical job: responding to missile strikes and drone attacks. Every time there's an attack, dozens of Ukrainian fighters take to the skies. Dealing with drones and missiles is tough. Their smaller size makes them harder to hit. Some Ukrainian pilots even say dogfighting another jet is easier than hunting down slow, plastic drones. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments.
I'm an F-16 fighter pilot. I was part of the first training group. You might be surprised to hear this, but the US hasn't handed over a single operational F-16 to Ukraine. Those came from European allies. What the US did provide were boneyard jets to keep Ukraine's F-16 fleet flying, and they trained this Ukrainian pilot. His name remains classified for security reasons. We studied new principles and new approaches to planning combat and reconnaissance missions. Meanwhile, specialists from the U.S. Air Force's 68th Electronic Warfare Squadron, who helped adapt the F-16 to Ukrainian conditions, had a big surprise in store for the Russians. It was a secret both Americans and Ukrainians kept locked down for months. We resolved the issue of information security from day one. Our unit is one of the most secure in Ukraine. Not even the Ministry of Defense or the General Staff has these kinds of security protocols. And clearly, it worked. The team from the 68th called this the best case in the squadron's history. So now it's time to give some credit to those brainy tech guys and finally pull back the curtain. But let's start at the beginning. Our primary missions include aerial reconnaissance of enemy forces and positions, as well as electronic intelligence. Here's the thing though, the jets Ukraine got from European partners weren't ready for the constant cat-and-mouse game happening in the skies over Ukraine. They had to be reprogrammed to handle Russian threats. The main concern, ours and the media's, was the CABs Russia's been using. CABs are a family of Russian-guided glide bombs. Death from above, dropped dozens of kilometers from the front lines. The best way to stop them? Kill the launch platform. But there's a catch. We can't get close enough to take out the launch aircraft. Russian air defense crews aren't sleeping. They live to shoot down an F-16. But the Falcon's new EW capabilities caught them off guard. Right now, we're running complex operations to jam those bombs electronically. At first, the US military didn't acknowledge just how deeply involved they were in boosting Ukraine's F-16s. But now we know. The 68th Electronic Warfare of the US Air Force led the effort to upgrade the jet's EW systems. And it wasn't easy. American specialists first had to study an unfamiliar EW system. Then they had to optimize and adapt a few unique innovations to work inside Ukrainian F-16s. Believe it or not, they pulled it off in just 2 weeks. That's like learning Chinese in 2 weeks. So yeah, the brainy guys who pulled this off deserve a like. Let's get this video into their algorithm feed. Hey, you did one hell of a job, guys. Of course, reconnaissance and EW are just part of what the F-16 does in Ukraine. Mission 2. We run 24/7 air defense patrols. Because there aren't enough ground-based systems to repel mass attacks, we operate in uncovered areas. Here too, electronic warfare is a game changer. Thanks to jamming, Shaheds get lost across Ukraine's skies, sometimes even turn around and fly back, without needing a missile to take them down. But F-16s don't just jam, they hit. This fighter can carry about 10 different air-to-air missile types. That's one of its biggest strengths. In total, it has 9 hardpoints, 1 under the fuselage, 6 under the wings, and 2 on the wingtips. We've already shown the fully loaded F-16V before. But those look very different from the ones Ukraine is flying. Not all hardpoints on Ukraine's F-16s are wired to carry air-to-air missiles. Only 6 of them are, 4 under the wings and 2 on the tips. C'est la vie, as the French say. And yes, we'll be talking about them a bit later. The Ukrainian F-16s we've seen in media so far carry 2 main missile types. The AM-120 AMRAAM, a radar-guided medium-range missile, and the AM-9 Sidewinder, an infrared-guided short-range missile. How effective are they? Over 80% of the missiles we fire reach and destroy their targets. Look closely. This F-16 only has 1 AIM-9 left under its wing. That likely means the other 5 already found their mark. And it's very possible that Ukraine is using even more advanced air-to-air missiles. Which ones? That's classified and depends on US political decisions. But when it comes to F-16s going head-to-head with Russian jets, here's what you need to know. At some points, we're coming very, very close. Your subscription tells YouTube our channel is worth watching. Tap subscribe to support us. It's like a high-level chess match. 2 grandmasters who know every move, waiting for the other to slip up.
І по їхнім діям ми бачимо, що
From their actions, it's clear they understand our weapon capabilities very well. They know when to move in and when to back off, and so do we. That's why pilots on both sides try to keep their distance. Modern fighters have powerful radars and long-range missiles. They can shoot each other down from dozens of kilometers away. A pilot's skill is all about timing, knowing exactly when to fire that one deadly shot. But taking out a Russian jet isn't easy. Those pilots are trained, and more importantly, they're scared too.
теж сидить жива людина, яка
There's a real person sitting in that enemy jet, and they don't want to die either. So, classic dogfights, where pilots can literally see each other through the acrylic canopy, are extremely rare. But that doesn't mean it's a relaxing job. On every mission, Ukrainian jets are in the crosshairs of Russian SAM systems. And getting chased by a surface-to-air missile? Yeah, that's stressful. The danger doesn't stop in the sky. Air bases are regular targets, but
бойове чергування на визначених
we're on combat alert from designated and backup airfields. That network is now very well developed. Ukrainian pilots almost never take off and land at the same base. The Ukrainian Air Force uses a tactic from Western doctrine called ACE, Agile Combat Employment. Early warnings of Russian missile strikes give them time to launch and disperse aircraft across remote airfields. Still, at least one close-quarters air battle did happen over Ukraine. It was on day one of the full-scale invasion, when Ukraine's air defense was partly destroyed and nearly completely disorganized. Over Kyiv, Russian Su-jets clashed with Ukrainian MiG-29s. The full pilot account and footage from that dogfight are in our other video, MiG-29 versus Su-34. But now, it's time to talk offensive missions for Ukraine's F-16s.
От коли навіть ви чуєте те,
When you hear that an air raid alert's been triggered somewhere in Russia, it's not just because a few drones are buzzing around. That's part of a well-coordinated operation. Almost every mission over Ukraine involves a full team effort, people, aircraft, and systems. One crew locks onto enemy air defenses or jams them with EW. Another group keeps Russian jets at bay. A third group strikes. F-16s can do all of it.
наразі ми можемо задавати удари.
Right now, we're only able to strike at tactical depth, but the effectiveness of those strikes is very high. It's basically surgical. We're like a scalpel. If needed, our bomb can fly straight through a small window. In military terms, the tactical zone usually means 20 to 30 kilometers deep. So, when this pilot talks about surgical strikes, he's likely referring to JDAMs, Joint Direct Attack Munitions, in 500, 1,000, or even 2,000 pound variants. These glide bombs have a range of about 15 to 28 miles. Or he might mean JDAM-Rs, the extended range versions, which can reach targets up to 45 miles, keeping the jet safely outside enemy air defenses. Another possibility is the GBU-39, also known as the SDB, small diameter bomb. With a maximum range of around 68 miles when dropped from high altitude, it deploys folding wings mid-flight to glide toward its target. Ukraine's been using these kinds of American glide bombs for a while. They were integrated with MiG-29s and Su-27s as early as winter 2022 to 2023. But on the F-16, these bombs are even more effective. Thanks to full targeting system integration and the ability to reprogram strike coordinates mid-mission. Along with bombs, Ukraine's MiG-29s and Su-27s can also fire U.S. anti-radiation missiles. Meanwhile, the Su-24 has been paired with long-range Storm Shadow and Scalp EG missiles, and the Russians absolutely hate those. The Su-25? It's been successfully matched with French AASM hammer bombs.
Виконуємо польоти на прикриття.
We're constantly flying cover missions for our MiGs and Sukhois.
То майже кожен день.
Almost every day, we fly more than just one or two sorties. We carry out multiple strikes on enemy positions beyond the front line. To work around compatibility issues between NATO weapons and older Soviet airframes, Ukraine's developed some very creative solutions, including third-party interface systems. Integrating Western weapons isn't just about physical adapters. Each setup needs a unique technical approach. So yes, Ukraine's legacy jets are still doing most of the heavy lifting, but things are changing.
Нам прийшло таке досить.
We've now received a solid reinforcement in the form of French jets, and they're already helping us a lot. The first Mirage 2005Fs arrived in Ukraine in February 2025. And surprisingly, they've been easier for Ukrainian pilots to master, especially those with time in MiG-29s or Su-27s. That might be thanks to some older French experience. Back in the early 2000s, France ran a 3-month training program for German Luftwaffe pilots who previously flew Soviet MiG-29s. That transition worked. For the F-16 though, you can't prep a pilot that fast. One of the reasons Ukrainian pilots adapted to the Mirage so quickly is because its controls feel familiar. Like the MiG-29, the Mirage has a center stick positioned between the pilot's legs. The cockpit systems are also simpler than what you'd find in an F-16. There's just less electronics overall. Maintenance? It's more demanding than a Soviet MiG-29, but still way easier than a modern F-16. But don't let that simplicity fool you. The Mirage 2005F is not a second-rate fighter. On paper, its performance is close to the F-16 variant Ukraine is flying. The Falcon still wins on payload. It's a beast when it comes to weapons capacity. But in terms of agility, the Mirage is one of the most maneuverable jets in the world. In fact, there's a recorded training kill against an American F-22. Yeah, you heard that right. A Mirage beat a Raptor. Now, to be fair, that was a mock dogfight. The F-22 pilot let the Mirage slip behind and come into gun range. Probably part of a training scenario, but still, the footage is impressive. We haven't heard much yet from Ukrainian pilots about flying the Mirage. What we do know is that the French jets are already performing well in the brutal conditions of the war, including intercepting Russian cruise missiles. Seems like the Mirage deserves a closer look. Want us to do a full deep dive video on the 2005F, including insider info and what it's really doing in Ukraine? Or maybe you have another topic in mind? Drop your ideas below. We'll choose from the most liked ones.
236 missiles and drones hit Ukraine in a single night, but over 85% were shot down, mostly thanks to the new F-16s. Why are these fighter jets the key to making Putin reconsider his massive attacks on Ukraine? And what really went down in the first air battle between an F-16 and a Russian Su-34? On October 12th, a Telegram channel run by Russian propagandists published a black and white photo of their aircraft. It seemed to be another downed Russian plane, but it was the very same shootdown that launched an actual wave of mystery, which each media outlet spun in its own way. For example, ISW published a report stating that a Russian military blogger had confirmed the loss of a Su-34 fighter jet, but without giving details of the incident. At the same time, another channel, allegedly run by Russian airborne officers, reported that the Su-34 was shot down by a new Ukrainian F-16 fighter jet when Russian pilots attempted to drop high-explosive bombs about 30 miles from the front line. Moreover, the Su-34 is a particularly problematic enemy because these aircraft are capable of dropping long-range guided bombs on frontline cities from over 50 miles away, all while being closely covered by Russian aircraft and air defense systems. This sounds like an asterisk task for the Ukrainian military, doesn't it? If it's confirmed that the Su-34 was shot down by an F-16, it would be the first time Ukraine has taken down a Russian manned aircraft using a Western fighter jet. Even more, it would be the first time an F-16 has taken down a Russian plane in its entire 50-year history of military missions. Either way, unlike the Russian pilot, you can hit the like button on this video right now. Later, Russian propagandists accused their military bloggers of lying about the Su-34 crash, and of preventing Russian forces from developing plans to counter Ukrainian F-16s. But even if the Russian command does try to establish a countermeasure, it will be extremely difficult to implement. The reason for this is the Western concept of weaponry, which emphasizes superiority in accuracy and range. This also applies to older models, such as the F-16. Compared to Russia's Su-27 and Su-34, the American fighter is better armed and has a more powerful radar system. Thanks to this, it can detect Russian aircraft at a distance, where it stays unnoticed. That can't be said about the Su-35, which is actually a modification of the Su-27, which still poses a real threat to American fighters. When it comes to weaponry, the Su-35 slightly outpaces the American fighter jet. For example, the Russian R-37M air-to-air missiles, which is mounted on the Su-35, can hit targets over 120 miles away. At the same time, the most powerful air-to-air missile, the AIM-120C8 AMRAAM-ER, attached to the F-16, can hit at just under 100 miles. The Su-35 could also outperform the F-16 in close combat due to its superior maneuverability. However, in modern warfare, close-range dogfights are unlikely. Everything is decided at long and medium distances, and it all comes down to who locks on to the other first. And most likely, it will be the Su-35 that locks on first, as its onboard radar can detect targets from about 125 miles away. However, as the experience of the Russia-Ukraine war shows, technological and weapon advantages can be neutralized through strategy and numbers. That's why it's crucial for Ukrainian pilots to not only get new jets, but also receive proper training. And just in time, the White House released a statement on its website announcing an increase in the number of Ukrainian pilots trained on the F-16 next year. Ukrainian partners are already preparing their aircraft for these pilots. For example, the Netherlands promises to provide all 42 of its F-16s. Ukraine expects 79 aircraft from its partners. Although this number is less than the 128 planes declared by the president for complete air superiority, even this number may be sufficient. The F-16s could be the spear that pierces the defenses of Russian bombing terror aimed at peaceful Ukrainian cities. And there's reason to believe in this, as Ukraine already successfully repelled a massive Russian attack at the end of the summer. Let's break down how that happened. On August 26th, Ukraine faced the largest attack since the start of the full-scale war. The Russians launched 127 missiles and 109 drones. Ukrainian air forces reported they managed to shoot down 102 missiles and 99 drones. Those are outstanding numbers. And sure, Western jets played a significant role in achieving such results. The General Headquarters of Ukraine clarified that F-16 fighters, together with anti-aircraft missile units, shot down Russian cruise missiles. This is exactly what Ukrainians needed. After all, F-16s can be much more effective than air defense systems. The point is that a cruise missile is quite a challenging target. It is small and flies at a low altitude, so even the most advanced radars cannot detect it when it descends to 160 feet. Because it flies below the horizon, ground-based defense systems are powerless in this situation. In addition, when attacked by cruise missiles, fighter jets can fly over them, which gives them an excellent view, especially compared to ground-based radars. All of this probably helped the Ukrainian Air Force destroy more than 85% of the targets that night. But why didn't Ukrainian pilots achieve such results with Su-27s or MiG-29s? The reason is that the F-16 has more advanced radar and optoelectronic equipment to detect small Russian targets, such as cruise missiles or the infamous Shahed drones, at long distances. The Soviet-style MiG-29 and Su-27 have to get so close to their targets that they have to be seen visually, effectively at gunpoint, which is very risky. However, even for F-16s, shooting down Russian missiles is also highly risky. During the night of the massive attack on Ukraine, one aircraft lost contact while approaching a Russian missile. The fact that one of the newly received F-16 fighters crashed in Ukraine was first reported by the Wall Street Journal, which believes that the American fighter jet was wrecked during a massive missile attack. According to their version, the F-16 crashed due to the explosion of a cruise missile that was shot down too close to the jet. You can only imagine how intense that clash must have been, filled with rapid maneuvers where every decision had to be made in split seconds. The Ukrainian pilot had to face 1.5 tons of deadly metal, a Russian Kh-101 long-range cruise missile. Given the still limited number of planes and pilots, this is a significant loss for Ukraine. But sadly, in a war of this scale, such sacrifices are inevitable. Thanks to the F-16s, Putin now has yet another unexpected problem to deal with. On October 14th, Ukrainian monitoring channels reported that Russian bombers refused to carry out the mission that night because they were afraid of an F-16 that may not have even been there. The fact is that with the appearance of American fighters in the Russian-Ukrainian war, any Ukrainian plane that takes off may look like an F-16 to the Russians. This is because the Russians cannot identify the type of craft on radar, as they can only see its markings, which look the same for all small fighters. So, if the Ukrainian Air Force launches even a Su-29 or Su-27, the Russians could, in fact, mistake it for an F-16. But you can't win a war with psychological pressure alone. Just like you can't get up-to-date videos about the Russian-Ukraine war without subscribing to our channel. So you'd better do it right now. And better yet, give us a thumbs up. In turn, we will tell you how the Ukrainians can use F-16s for their offensive. If the Ukrainian Air Force is able to control the skies, the American fighter jets can launch intense attacks on the Russians on the ground. This is the same tactic the Russian army uses to advance along the front lines. For such tactics, the Ukrainian Air Force could equip its F-16s with JDAM-ER glider bombs. Previously, they were adapted for Ukrainian MiG-29 and Su-27, but due to the specifics of the adaptation, they had a drop range of only 25 miles instead of the claimed 43 miles. However, when used with F-16s, JDAM-ERs can be dropped at the desired 43. Additionally, F-16s can serve as an effective carrier for AGM-88 HARM missiles, allowing them to effectively destroy Russian radars and air defense systems. Ukrainian officials have repeatedly stated that Ukrainian forces are also expected to start deploying their versions of large glide bombs. Retired Polish Brigadier General Jaroslaw Kraszewski also believes that the arrival of fighter jets could change the balance of power in the Russian-Ukrainian war. He added that if Ukraine were allowed to strike deep into Russia with Western-supplied weapons, it could cyclically and effectively destroy the Kremlin's logistics. When this happens, the Russian army's logistics will be cut off from the main forces. At that point, the Ukrainian Army Command will be able to deliver a devastating blow that could change the course of the war. However, there are many threats to the F-16 that could prevent the fighter jets from surviving such a grand turning point. American fighters are a priority target for the Russians, so their delivery is accompanied by a high degree of secrecy. They are stored at dispersed bases with underground or fortified shelters, along with decoys. However, this, in turn, complicates logistics for Ukrainians. In addition, the F-16 is not a magic pill. It is machinery, and it can be destroyed. Russia has both the latest ground-based air defense systems, such as the S-400, and the 5th-generation Su-27 aircraft, which have significant advantages over the F-16 and can destroy them. However, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the Russian military-industrial complex has been able to produce only 4 copies of the Su-57, which gives Ukrainians some positive news. And finally, the arrival of the F-16s marks a shift for Ukraine's Air Force toward NATO standards. This is a huge positive for Ukraine, as NATO weapons perform much better when used with the jets they were designed for, rather than being retrofitted onto outdated MiGs. While there may not be many F-16s in Ukraine just yet, their power shouldn't be underestimated, especially by the Russians. And as for you, dear viewers, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment. Well, this handsome one has something to boast about. From Operation Desert Storm, when an F-16 Fighting Falcon dodged not 1, but 6 surface-to-air missiles, to Israel in '81, when such jets bombed a reactor in Iraq and returned without a single loss. These days, though, the F-16 is up against a whole new kind of challenge. Will the Falcon reclaim its historic status, or will the ruthless Russian-Ukrainian war bring an end to its illustrious 50-year career? Do you think this impressive fighter stands a chance to show its worth? Let us know with a thumbs up. Word has it that the F-16 encounters its fair share of troubles even before it takes to the skies. Allegedly, Ukrainian airfields may not meet the necessary standards for the F-16 aircraft. Apparently, concerns revolve around the fragility of the F-16's landing gear. Also, debris could possibly be drawn into the aircraft's air intake located under the fuselage, potentially causing serious malfunctions. But let's be real here. That's just a story made up by the media for the sake of catchy headlines. After all, these matters were settled decades back. F-16 jets have already landed at Ukrainian airfields as part of the Safe Skies training. Moreover, in Egypt, most military airfields are built using Soviet-style concrete airfield slabs, and there are currently 220 F-16s in operation. We suggest focusing on what truly poses a threat, primarily Russian attacks on Ukrainian airfields. As soon as the fighter jets arrive in Ukraine, make no doubt, the Russians will immediately start their hunt. Is it possible to defend the F-16 Fighting Falcon against Russian ground strikes? To give a reasonable answer, let's look at previous aviation losses during the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Just 10 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported the destruction of practically all combat-ready aviation in Ukraine.
Практически вся боеспособная авиация киевского режима уничтожена.
Well, to put it mildly, it turned out to be untrue. It's noteworthy that the Ukrainian air forces are still operating. According to independent analysts at Oryx, Ukraine's air force lost 73 combat aircraft, while Russians lost 90. This number aligns with the estimates provided by General James Hecker, who serves as the commander of the US Air Force in Europe and Africa. However, at the time this video was created, only 6 Ukrainian fighter jets have been destroyed on the ground. Moreover, 3 of them were destroyed in the first days of the invasion, and 3 more in the fall of 2023. It appears that the Ukrainians have a firm grip on the situation. However, recent strikes on Ukrainian airfields cast doubt on this belief. Russians have reached Ukrainian aircraft at the airfield at Dovinstev, located 40 to 45 miles from the front line. The strikes on Dovinstev marked the debut of a new version of the Russian Lancet loitering munition. This 35-pound kamikaze drone typically operates as part of a group with specialized reconnaissance drones. Armored vehicles have long been the preferred targets, but now airplanes have become the focus of attacks. According to the Institute for Science and International Security, Lancet demonstrates a high level of autonomy and significant obstacle avoidance. The Lancet poses a significant challenge to air defense systems, making it rightfully the foremost threat to the F-16 mission in Ukraine. Well, Ukraine's Air Force will need to steer clear of airfields near the front line that lack concrete air shelters. Still, will this eliminate the constant concern of Russian missile strikes? In this scenario, the Falcon would have really benefited from the Patriot. In Western military doctrine, this system is specifically employed to protect airfields. However, Ukrainians are unlikely to have such a prospect, so pilots will have to rely on their own skills and try to dodge Russian missiles. Well, it's not all doom and gloom. Ukraine's air forces are actually employing the tactics known in Western doctrine as ACE, Agile Combat Employment. The same tactic is practiced by the air forces of Sweden and Taiwan, and in Japan, it is called Koku Jeitai. ACE's success relies on having the upper hand in information. Early warning of Russian missile attacks provides enough time to disperse aircraft to remote airfields. Ukrainian pilots almost never take off and land at the same airfield, according to General James Hecker, commander of the US Air Forces in Europe and Africa. At first glance, it seems like a simple concept. After all, missiles only hit based on coordinates. Despite facing logistical hurdles with fuel and weapons, along with the task of servicing various aircraft simultaneously, it is a marvel that the Ukrainian Air Force has managed to stay one step ahead of the Russian forces for over 2 years of war, especially considering how challenging it is to maintain an F-16. In the Ukrainian mission, the bar is set high. All 10 planes need to take off simultaneously, a feat far more demanding than the usual benchmark 7 out of 10. This puts it in a league tougher than even Formula One racing. Ukrainian airfields are not the safest places on Earth, though it is possible to survive there. This means that the main adventures await the F-16 in the air. In the areas near the front line, both Russia and Ukraine both have a fairly large number of ADGM and other air defense systems, effectively safeguarding their respective sides on the front line against enemy tactical aviation. No one fully controls the sky. It's unlikely that we'll see any dogfights, Top Gun style, anytime soon. If such a duel does happen, it will be one of the most dramatic battles between an aging but very powerful Western aircraft and one of Russia's best fighters, the Su-35. When it comes to technical specs, the Su-35 outshines the F-16. With a length of 72 feet and a wingspan of 50 feet, the Russian fighter jet is approximately 50% larger than its American counterpart. Its weight is more than 18 tons, twice as much as the Falcons. However, the F-16 boasts greater maneuverability compared to the Su-35. Maneuverability plays a role even in long-range combat. Importantly, the Su-35 is capable of carrying the R-77 and R-37M air-to-air missiles. They have the potential to be pivotal players in this duel. The Su-35's Irbis-E radar has a theoretical range of 249 miles, but it's worth remembering that this figure may be exaggerated. Otherwise, Russian Su-35s wouldn't need to rely on the A-50 for airborne operations. The Ukrainian version of the F-16 has a radar range of only 68 miles, so the Su-35 can detect the F-16 much earlier and therefore attack earlier. Unlike Soviet fighters, the F-16 is equipped with AIM-120 air-to-air missiles, which can independently identify targets. Also, any aircraft is equipped with a radar sensor, so an F-16 pilot can anticipate being tracked, unlike the Soviet MiG-29 and Su-27. Britain's Royal United Services Institute (RUSI) report claims that Russian fighter jets frequently manage to launch R-77-1 missiles at Ukrainian fighter jets at long ranges. During such attacks, Ukrainian pilots have to defend themselves or take risks far beyond their effective range. Once again, this underscores the fact that the Su-35 indeed poses a significant threat to the F-16. However, let's not forget that the Russians most often use the Su-35 to cover the Su-34 carrying guided bombs. In turn, the Su-34 is characterized by poor maneuverability, making it quite vulnerable to the F-16 and potentially an easy target. Aside from the highly valuable Su-35, Russians largely rely on their interceptor MiG-31BM equipped with R-37M missiles, which have poor maneuverability. Evaluating their performance in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, doubts have also been raised about their reliability. We should not discount the large number of Su-30s, Su-27s, and MiG-29s. Even modernized, they lag far behind the capabilities of the F-16. There are still other threats to the F-16 in the sky. The next potential danger facing the aircraft will be the well-known Russian air defense system, the S-400, classified as the NATO SA-21 Growler. The main types of missiles for the S-400 is the 48N6 family, which, depending on the modification, has a range of 100 to 160 miles. However, in 2022, the Russians started mass production of the 40H-6 missiles with a range of approximately 250 miles. The SA-21 Growler becomes particularly dangerous when paired with A-50 Mainstay D AWACS aircraft, which can detect Ukrainian aircraft at distances of up to 120 to 180 miles. It is worth noting that, despite all the difficulties, the Ukrainians have already managed to shoot down as many as 2 A-50 aircraft. To protect themselves from the SA-21 Growler, F-16s can use AGM-88 HARM anti-radar missiles with a range of up to 100 miles. F-16s will likely use standard combat practices to outsmart enemy air defenses, including flying at low altitudes. And finally, it is worth remembering that the F-16 is a universal soldier. It can be equipped with a whole range of missiles at once and be used for various purposes: destroying bridges and headquarters, eliminating drones and missiles, combating enemy aircraft, and even carrying Harpoon anti-ship missiles, thus contributing to the destruction of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. The United States agrees to arm Ukraine's F-16s with a modern AIM-120 medium-range air-to-air missile. The latest version of the AIM-120C8 is estimated to have a range of about 100 miles. That's twice as much as the missiles on Ukrainian fighter jets, which had to fly low to the ground as they approached the front line. By employing the same tactics, the F-16 can pose a threat to Russian bombers carrying guided bombs. This will significantly ease the burden on the Ukrainian ground forces. The F-16 is also a carrier for JDAM-ER munitions. This is a type of guided bomb with a 45-mile range that has already proven itself in this war. Discover more about it in one of our videos. Let's highlight that the F-16 can carry the most powerful 2,000-pound JDAM-ER bombs, capable of breaking through any defense. Eager to witness their impressive capacity on the battlefield? Give this video a thumbs up. The F-16 arsenal also includes long-range precision bombs like the AGM-154 JSOW, with a maximum distance of 80 miles. Its warhead is identical to that used on the Storm Shadow or Scalp EG cruise missile. Since the introduction of the SDB bombs, they've also been integrated into most F-16 aircraft. The bomb itself is small, yet its warhead weighs from 35 to 205 pounds. The aircraft can fly beyond 90 miles, enabling bombs to be dropped from a distance greater than those from Russian FABs with UMPK, all while staying out of reach of Russian air defense systems. Unfortunately, as of today, the Ukrainian mission has a small arsenal of long-range air-to-ground missiles for the F-16. More precisely, there are none at all. Nevertheless, there is hope of further upgrading the aircraft's software to equip it with truly insane AGM-158 JASSM missiles boasting ranges from 250 to 620 miles. The JASSM missile features an infrared homing head that operates in the terminal phase of the trajectory and enables it to hit targets with pinpoint accuracy and ignore any electronic countermeasures, ECM. JASSMs could be the game changer that turns the F-16 into a silver bullet. Consequently, the F-16 will fall into an edge of difficult and harsh conditions where it will not be able to dictate the rules. However, it has enough capabilities and weapons to give Russian opponents a hard time. In the last 2 years, Ukrainian pilots have demonstrated that skill and tactics are crucial factors in warfare. So, the Ukrainian mission might just mark the peak of the F-16's legacy. After all, while the names of heroes may fade, the weapons of victory endure in memory.